All
Hi,
right, very
everyone.
good. So we like to start these, well, first, happy 2024. We wish you all blessings in the new year. And in case you're wondering, that is not a work of art on the wall behind me. That's actually my halo, just in case any of you were wondering. We wanted to start this free evening with a channeled meditation from Liesel. For those who don't know, Liesel channels a group consciousness, a collective that we call affectionately the beings of light, or BOL for short. And they will channel a meditation for you now.
Okay. So, Stephanie, everybody's muted. Good. Okay. So just settle in. Begin bringing awareness to the breath. To the inflow, followed by the outflow. A beautiful rhythm that you can count on at any time. And breathing in this now moment. And breathing out all past and future. Breathing in the peace and joy of being. Breathing out all contraction. Breathing in the simplicity of just being. And breathing out all the complexities of the mind. Allowing yourself to drop deeply into your body. Just letting energy move down into the body. Bringing some awareness to the soles of the feet. And just welcoming in that beautiful energy of Mother Earth, of Gaia. Allowing her to nurture and nourish you. Flowing into you as you. For she is a part of you. She is a part of the one being that is all of the universe, which you are. Just allowing her beautiful golden energy to move more and more into you. Filling your body, nourishing you. And that energy moves all the way into you. And then at the top of the head, just opening to receive a beautiful column of divine white light source energy. Pure fundamental beingness. Just allowing that energy to move more and more into you. reminding you of your true nature. Reminding you of your eternal nature, your infinite nature. Just allowing that energy more and more into you, into your heart, into your body, into your mind. And then bringing awareness into the heart area. Just feeling that gentle emanation of love there. The love that you are, the love that all beings are, the way in which you connect and intertwine with every being in the universe. The way in which you and I and we and all are one. The way in which there is but one heart beating here. There is but one being speaking to itself. Knowing itself from all these different vantage points. Remembering itself through the cohesion of love that binds it together. This one field of love and light, of which you all are. This is the truth. And as you let go of illusion, the illusion of separation, the illusion of the possibility of death, the illusion that you can be anything other than pure love. As you let go of these illusions, you come to radiate more and more. You come to know the truth of your being more and more. And we celebrate each and every moment of your blessed awakening. Now, just gently coming back into the room, coming back to the screen, and ready to share in this gift of this time we get to spend with one another.
All right. Thank you, Liesel. Thank you, beings of light. So I want to talk for a little bit and give you all the foundational information you should have to understand pre-birth planning. And a few of you might have heard this information before if you've been with us in other events. If that's the case, bear with me, please. It won't take that long, but I want to make sure everybody gets the same foundational information. So first, let me share with you how I came to do this work. Back in 2003, I was self-employed as a marketing and communications consultant, basically doing different kinds of corporate writing. I found this work to be infinitely unfulfilling, and perhaps more to the point, I had the nagging sense that I wasn't doing what I had come to Earth to do. The problem was that I didn't know what I had come to Earth to do. I just knew that I wasn't doing it. And so in 2003, I basically had what you could call an existential crisis over this. And fortunately for me, the universe staged an intervention. And three things happened all within a very short time of each other, the combination of which got me to leave the corporate world and embark on the path to writing my first book. The first thing that happened, I had my first session ever with a medium. This was at a point in my life when I wasn't sure if I even believed in mediumship, but I thought, nothing else is working. I've got to figure out what it is I came to Earth to do. Maybe this can help. And so I decided to invest an hour of my time and just see what happens. So I go into this session with the medium, and the first thing she says to me right out of the box is, "Your spirit guides are here." And I said, "What is a spirit guide?" I mean, I'd never even heard the term before. So she explained that. And then she said, "Your guides would like to speak directly with you." And she started to channel them. The first thing they said was, "You planned your life, including your biggest challenges, before you were born." And I will tell you, I just shook my head and I said, "Why in the world did I do that?" And they said, "You did this for purposes of spiritual growth." Now, I come from a very conventional mainstream background. I have a scientific education based on the scientific method. So coming from, as I did, from that sort of background, I might very well have dismissed all of this as some kind of delusion on my part, except that after saying that, the guides launched into this lengthy monologue in which they went through all of my major challenges one by one and told me why I had planned them. And what was really impressive about this is that I had not told them anything about myself, nor had I said anything about myself to the medium prior to the session. So as you can imagine, if you're talking to beings who know literally everything about you without you saying anything, that gives them a fair amount of credibility. So when they introduced this idea of pre-birth planning, I was inclined to listen to them. Now, within a very short time of that experience, I had another profound life-changing experience. I was introduced to a woman who has the ability to go into trance and channel her soul, her higher self. So I said to her, "I'm thinking of writing a book about how we plan our lives before we're born." The idea had been planted in this session with the medium. And I said, "Could I speak with your higher self about pre-birth planning?" And fortunately for me, she agreed to do that. So she and I got together 5 times, or a total of about 15 hours. And in this 15 hours of channeling, this huge volume of information came forward that verified everything my guides had said through the medium, but then expanded upon it greatly. So her higher self told me in detail how pre-birth planning works, why we plan challenges for ourselves. I was told specifically in her case which challenges had been discussed, which had been chosen and why, which had not been chosen and why not. And so again, this huge volume of information came forward that in many ways served as the foundation for all 3 books that I eventually went on to write. And then within a very short time of that experience, the most profound experience of all, I was home in my apartment in Chicago where I lived at the time. It was the middle of a weekday afternoon, and I decided to take a break from work and go for a walk. So I'm walking down the sidewalk, middle of the afternoon, and all of a sudden, I was overcome by this feeling of pure, overwhelming, unconditional divine love for every person I saw. I call it pure, divine, unconditional love because those are the words that get closest to what this felt like in the English language. But truly, there are no words to describe this. I could also call it transcendent. It was not a human kind of love, and it was not a personal kind of love. And I felt this for every person I saw. Every time my eyes saw another person, this wave of just pure divine love for that person washed over me. I remember this experience very clearly because the first person I saw after this started to happen was a cab driver. He was just sitting behind the wheel of his cab waiting for a customer to come along. And I looked at this man who, of course, was a total stranger to me. I just felt this pure, overwhelming, unconditional love for him. And then I looked up, and there was a man's barber shop on the corner. I looked through the window and I saw the barber cutting a client's hair. Again, two total strangers. But as I looked at them, there again was this pure, overwhelming, unconditional love. And then I turned around and I saw a young woman, a mother, pushing an infant in a stroller down the street. And as I looked at them, there again was this overwhelming, pure love. Everywhere I looked, every time I saw another person, this love washed over me. Now, as this was happening, you could say that I was caused to know. I was caused to know that we as souls are made literally from the energy of unconditional love. So when the beings of light said a few minutes ago through Liesel, something about release the illusion that you are anything other than pure love, that was actually the experience I had in those moments. And I understood that I and everybody else are made from, literally from the energy of unconditional love. What I didn't know was why this was happening. That became clear a couple of years later. By that time, I had looked at a number of people's pre-birth plans for my first book. And what I found in every case, no exceptions, the pre-birth plan was always based on complete unconditional love for every person involved. This was true even when great challenges were being planned. It was true even when quote unquote negative roles were being scripted for people. It was always based on total unconditional love for every person involved. And then I realized, aha, that experience that I had a couple of years ago walking down the street, that was gifted to me so that when I found this result in my research, I would be absolutely certain that what I was finding was true. And this is why I can say to you tonight with complete confidence and total certainty that I believe that we as souls are made literally from the energy of unconditional love, because that was my experience walking down the sidewalk that day. So these three events happened all within just a few weeks of each other. And the combination of them got me to say, okay, I'll leave the corporate world and I will attempt to write a book about how we plan our lives before we're born. And then I spent the next 3 years on a full-time basis writing Your Soul's Plan. It's funny, you know, how life works out. I remember thinking to myself every now and then as I was working on that book, I wonder if anybody will be interested in reading anything that I'm writing. I really didn't know. And then it turned out that there was a lot of interest. And so it's just, it's led to a much more fulfilling, much more gratifying life where I now feel that I'm doing just what I came to Earth to do. And that feels very, very good. So briefly, that's how I came to do this kind of work. Now, let me share with you what I found in the research for the books. There are 5 main reasons why we ourselves plan big challenges before we're born. You may want to take notes on this part. The first reason is balancing and releasing karma. Balancing and releasing karma are not the same thing. Balancing karma means you plan to have a new experience that energetically offsets a previous experience. Releasing karma means you heal the underlying tendency that created the karma in the first place. In other words, if all you do is balance karma without also releasing it, you'll just end up recreating the same karma over and over again. An example I like to use to illustrate balancing karma is, let's say that 2 people had a past life together in which one was ill and the other was the caregiver. When those 2 people transition back into spirit at the end of that incarnation and have their life review, as we all do, they'll see the caregiving relationship portrayed in the life review. And when they see that, they may or may not feel complete with the experience of caregiving. May is the operative word there. And they decide for themselves, we're complete with that, or we're not. If they feel complete with that experience, then as I understand it, there is no karma, and they'll go on to plan something totally different. But if for any reason they feel incomplete with that experience, the feeling of incompletion is the karma. So let's say they feel that way. How do they then balance the karma? Well, the easiest and most direct thing to do is just to trade places. So now the one who was ill will plan for the upcoming incarnation to be the caregiver. The one who was the caregiver will plan in the next incarnation to have an illness. They'll just trade places. So that's reason number one for planning big challenges before we're born, balancing and releasing karma. The second reason for planning big challenges that I've seen in my research for the books is healing. And there's a very good example of this in the first book, Liesel's Plan. There's a chapter about the pre-birth planning of deafness and blindness. The deafness story is about a young woman named Penelope. She was 24 at the time I spoke with her for the book. She was born completely deaf in both ears. She and I had the opportunity to go into her pre-birth planning session and actually listen to the conversation that had taken place when she planned the deafness. And what happened in this conversation, we learned that in the lifetime immediately prior to this one, she had the same mother she has in this lifetime. And in that past life, when she was a little girl, she heard her mother shot to death by the mother's boyfriend. She didn't actually see the murder, but she heard the gunshots that led to her mother's death. As you can imagine, she was quite traumatized by that, so much so that it led her to suicide later in that lifetime. So Penelope returned to spirit from that lifetime with what you could call an energy of unhealed trauma, which now has to be healed. In her pre-birth planning session, her spirit guide says to her, "My dear, would you prefer to be born deaf so that no similar trauma will happen to you again, and so that you can complete your healing from the last lifetime?" And she responds, "Yes, that is what I want and what I wish to do." And then what follows is a fascinating dialogue in which she and her guide work out the details of deafness. That's reason number two for planning big challenges, healing. The third reason is service to others. This is something that I have seen in literally every pre-birth plan I've ever looked at. It's always there in one form or another to one degree or another. If you read spiritual or metaphysical literature, you've undoubtedly heard of the concept of oneness. This is the idea that there's actually only one being in existence in the universe. And it's you, it's me, it's all of us. Each one of us is like a single cell in the body of the one being in existence in the universe. So, as I understand it, this orientation towards service is a natural reflection of oneness consciousness, which is our natural state of consciousness when we're back home on the other side. In other words, let's say that you and I are back home on the other side and we're planning a lifetime together. And you perceive, you actually experience that I am literally you. It's not just a concept the way it is here for most people. You actually experience that I am literally you. Well, in that case, of course, you will want to be of service to me. And conversely, if I perceive or experience that you are literally me, then of course, I will want to be of service to you. So this orientation towards service, which again is in everybody's pre-birth plan as far as I know, I think is a natural outgrowth of oneness consciousness, which is our natural state of consciousness back on the other side. That's the third reason for planning big challenges. The fourth, and this I think is really the big one out of the five, is a desire to experience contrast. And let me explain what I mean by that. I shared with you a few moments ago my experience of unconditional love for all people. I was walking down the sidewalk that day. The non-physical realm we come from, as I understand it, is a realm of total unconditional love. So if we are made from the energy of unconditional love, which was my experience, and if we are in this realm of only unconditional love, That means that we don't perceive any contrast to ourselves, which in turn means we don't fully understand or appreciate who or what we are. We don't understand fully what it means to be a soul made from the energy of unconditional love. So I think what the soul is doing here on the physical plane is that we have come for the contrast, the not love, so to speak, which we would all agree there's a lot of. Because through the experience of the not love, by the time you go home at the end of an incarnation, you understand much more deeply, much more profoundly what unconditional love really and truly is. It's the contrast that teaches you that. That's reason number 4, contrast. And the 5th and final reason, strictly speaking, this is a subset of number 2, healing, but it's so important, I like to break it out as a separate item of its own. And that is healing or correcting false feelings or false beliefs about oneself. And let me explain how this works. As I understand it, almost everybody has had at least one past life, and usually many, in which certain things happened that caused you to pick up a false belief or false feeling about yourself. 2 of the most common false beliefs or feelings about self are 1, that you're powerless, and 2, that you're unworthy or perhaps even worthless. If you feel or believe yourself to be powerless, unworthy, or worthless, to your soul that feels discordant, meaning your soul knows that that is not true. And your soul wants to clear or heal the false feeling or false belief. So how is that done? Well, here in the 3rd dimension, or 3rd density where we are, or I should say we're now in 4th density, what happens is you magnetize to yourself experiences that seem on the surface to confirm the false feeling or false belief. So if you feel or believe yourself to be powerless, unworthy, or worthless, that is going to be mirrored back to you by external events, people in your life, and so forth. This kind of mirroring is a fundamental purpose of life on the physical plane. The world is set up to mirror you back to you so that you can find out what lies within your consciousness, even if it's subconscious. And if there's something there that is in need of healing, you can then bring it to the light of conscious awareness where you can set about healing it. So again, if you believe or feel yourself to be powerless, unworthy, or worthless, you'll magnetize to yourself experiences that seem on the surface to confirm that. Now, I realize what I've just described might sound harsh and perhaps even punitive. I can assure you it is not the universe's intention to be either harsh or punitive. The universe is loving. And what it's trying to do in its infinite love for you is mirror you back to you so that you find out what's within your consciousness. And again, if there's something there in need of healing, you can then set about healing it. So that's the 5th and final reason for planning big challenges before we're born, healing or correcting false beliefs or false feelings about oneself. So those are the basics. That's pre-birth planning 101, so to speak. Now, you have any comments, or should I just continue?
No, well, there was something interesting that came from the beings of light as you were speaking about contrast. What was said is that another way of looking at it is that we're testing our remembrance of our true nature when we come here. That's the contrast. Can we remember that we are love and that all other beings are love? Can we remember that while experiencing these illusions, while experiencing things that seem to contradict that truth? So that was kind of I haven't heard them put it that way before, but it's like a testing of your remembrance of your true nature.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Before we go on, I want to tell you about some of our upcoming offerings. On February 4th, we're going to have a group between lives soul regression. By the way, all of this is at yoursoulsplan.com on the events page. The between lives soul regression, or BLSR for short, is the form of hypnosis that I've been practicing for a number of years now. Briefly, what happens in a BLSR, we go through some preliminary steps to help you relax, and then I guide the client or the group into a past life. It's usually a past life that had a big impact on the plans for the current lifetime. If you're doing it in the group on February 4th, you'll experience 4 different scenes in the past life, the last of which will be the death scene. The part of your consciousness that is having the experience will leave the body in the death scene and cross back over to the other side, which I realize might sound a little bit ominous, but there's actually nothing to it. It's very easy and gentle. When you get home, so to speak, most likely a spirit guide will greet you, but it could be a loved one, an angel, an ascended master. Whoever greets you, you talk with them about why you were shown that past life, what's important to know about it, how it affected the plans for the current lifetime. And then you'll ask whoever you're speaking with to take you to what is called your council of elders. These are the very wise, loving, and highly evolved beings who oversee your personal evolution. They know literally everything about you, every past life you've had, and everything about the plans for your current lifetime. When the group gets in front of their respective councils, I'll prompt everybody to ask a very long series of questions that will cover all the major areas of your life. Now, you can go off and have your own individual conversation with your council. You're always free to do that, but you're pretty safe sticking with the questions that I'll use for the group. They're quite comprehensive. We go through your challenges, your major relationships, pretty much everything you would want to know about the current lifetime. The main questions we are looking at answering are: what did you plan? Why did you make those plans? How are you doing in terms of fulfilling your plans? And how can you better fulfill your plans? So you should come out with a better understanding of those 4 basic questions. And we created a discount code for everybody who's here tonight. It's Awaken Feb, all capital letters, AWAKENFEB, Awaken Feb. So you go through the registration process following the link from the events page. At some point you see text for a box for a coupon code. Click on that, the box will open, enter Awaken Feb in all capital letters.
Another thing I'd like to say about the Between Lives Soul Regression Workshop is, in addition to getting out to find out all that wonderful, juicy information about your life plan and, your experiences, etc., I think one of the most powerful things that people can experience in it is an expanded state of consciousness. Is for some people, it's the first time that they have experienced themselves as love, or the first time that they have experienced, the love that's emanating from their counsel and their spirit guides and angels, that unconditional love, the first time they've experienced something like that. So I think for a lot of people, it's not just the information that they get out of it, but the expanded sense of who and what they are, and the experience of of themselves as love, or the love that's being broadcast to them.
So again, the discount code for 15% off is Awaken Feb, all in capital letters. Then on February 10th, we're doing the same Between Lives Soul Regression again with translation into Polish. So if you happen to speak Polish or know anybody who does, this would be the time to do that. It's the only Polish workshop of 2024. And then the next day, February 11th, is the Star Souls workshop, which Liesel channeled from the Beings of Light. Would you like to describe that?
Yeah, so this is a regression that the Beings of Light gave, and it's to help people connect with their star soul origins and their star soul energetic connections. So I have always felt like I did not come from this planet. I remember when I was a young child, this was one of my earliest memories. I remember just absolutely knowing, it was completely clear that I wasn't from here, that, you know, most of my time had been spent elsewhere. And that I didn't question. The thing that didn't make sense to me was the fact that nobody seemed to be acknowledging that. And so the conclusion that I came to was that my parents must be paying everybody to act like I was just like everybody else. Uh, so that's what my child brain came up with. But, you know, most of the time when I experience past lives, they're not here on this planet. And there are many of us who have come here and chosen to be human in order to help, particularly during this time of ascension, this time when humanity is making this quantum leap in its evolution. And it can be really, really, you know, discombobulating if you're not used to the vibrations of Earth. And for so many of us, and this was true for me for decades, it was just a struggle just to function here. And so this workshop, this regression is absolutely geared to help you begin to really thrive here on Earth, and to awaken your, you know, your latent gifts, and to strengthen your connection to your star soul family, and to just really help you blossom into what it is you came here to do. And, you know, there can actually also be people who are star souls who don't necessarily have a lot of lifetimes in other planets or other realms, but maybe in ancient civilizations that had strong connections to beings from the stars. So if any of that resonates for you, I suggest going on to the website, and you can read a little bit more about the Star Souls workshop. I know the people who've participated have just really been over the moon about the experience.
So the discount code for that is the same, Awaken Feb, all in capital letters, 15% off, same registration process. When you see the text for the box for coupon code, click on that, the box opens, enter the code, finish the registration process. This coupon code is good up until the workshops start, but I will tell you, I'll strongly recommend, if you're going to take it, sign up at least 5 to 7 days ahead of time if you can, because there's some preparation that is recommended for the workshop. There's a recorded orientation that you really need to listen to. It's 20 minutes long, and there are recorded guided meditations that you should work with at least a few times to practice relaxing to the sound of my voice. Not required, but very helpful if you can manage it. So that Star Souls is on February 11th. Then on March 16th is another Between Lives Soul Regression, this one with translation into Spanish. And I know there are a number of native Spanish speakers who signed up for tonight's event. That event is on March 16th. If you want more information about that, go to the contact form on yoursoulsplan.com and tell me, and I will forward your email to the workshop producer who is in Spain. She'll send details to you. And we should mention Rise to the Path. Would you like to share that?
Sure. So we have a monthly membership program called Rise to the Path. And it's just, we had the most recent meeting a couple of nights ago, and it's so soul filling. It's just a tremendously loving group of people, and they're just so loving and supportive to one another. And we meet once a month. The meetings are recorded, and we generally, you know, talk about topics that are of interest to group, I generally channel a longer meditation. We, take live questions and submitted questions. And then as a member, you have access to the membership homepage, which has a whole bunch of meditations from the beings of light. It has a year's worth of previously recorded membership sessions, so you can go back and catch up on everything. And it has all of the written channelings from the beings of light, which are kind of like teachings. So there's a tremendous amount of resources, and it's just a beautiful group of people. They really have come to feel like family, and I look forward to the gathering every month. So you would all be welcome there, and it's a great place to feel like you can really be yourself and talk about these kinds of things. Because I know in some people are very, very much in a mainstream kind of life or a mainstream kind of world, and don't have the opportunity to talk about these things without people thinking they're like a little woo-woo. So it's a wonderful safe space where you can talk about anything that's going on in your spiritual journey.
All right, so what we're going to do now, I picked a few of these submitted questions that I think have broad applicability, so we'll speak to those, and then we'll take some live questions. Now, for those of you who are watching this on a recording, we stop the recording at the end of the submitted questions before we start the live questions. That's in order to preserve the privacy of those who are asking live questions. We don't want that going out on a recording. So apologies for that, but if it ends abruptly at the last submitted question, that's why. So one person wrote, did I plan my cancer? First and foremost, I would encourage you to rephrase your thinking about that and not label it my cancer. It's not something you want to claim ownership of. Could call it the cancer, a cancer, something like that. In terms of did you plan it? Almost certainly as a potential, probably not as a certainty. There are very few things that are planned as certainties. So the way the beings of light have explained this to me and Liesel, they say, think of a stack of sheets of paper. So in this stack, every sheet represents a complete set of pre-birth plans. Every person has their own stack of sheets of paper. The pages toward the top of the stack are the highest vibrational pre-birth plans. Those are the ones where most of the learning is done through love, peace, and joy, not so much through pain and suffering. The sheets at the bottom of the stack are the opposite of that. That's where most of the learning is done through pain and suffering, not so much through love, peace, and joy. So what you want, what everybody wants, of course, is to get yourself on that sheet of paper that's as high in the stack as you can be. How do you do that? Well, you do that by raising your vibration. There are many, many ways to raise your vibration, and we don't have time to go into all of them here. But the primary way, the rule of thumb that I think is most easy to remember and simple, although not always easy to apply, is anytime you have to make a decision of any kind, no matter how big or small, ask yourself the following question. What would love with a capital L do now? Whatever the answer to that question is, do that. The more often you can do that, the more frequently, the more consistently, you will move way up in that stack of sheets of paper. Somebody else wrote, is it cheating to get a better idea of your pre-birth plan? This is a great question. The answer is no, and let me explain why it's not cheating. When you are back on the other side and you're planning an incarnation, it's like you've got a huge, thick history book in front of you that spans all time on planet Earth. And there's no beginning to the book, there's no end, but every conceivable time on Earth is in there somewhere on one of those pages. So you at the soul level are flipping through this immense history book, looking for that point in linear time where the circumstances are optimal for you to learn whatever it is you wish to learn. So as you're doing this, you're shown scenes of what that time period is like. You can immerse yourself in those scenes and actually feel what you will feel in certain situations. You have a very good idea of the circumstances in which you're incarnating. So the reason I'm sharing this with you, if it was important to you not to quote unquote cheat by finding out about your pre-birth plans, you would have almost infinite opportunity to pick a page in this history book where either you would not be exposed to this kind of information, it just wasn't publicly available, or you could put yourself in the current time period, but place yourself in circumstances where either you wouldn't be exposed to this idea or you would be inclined to ignore or disbelieve this idea. So you could, for example, place yourself in a very mainstream family in a Western mind-oriented society, possibly a very religious family, and you would be taught, conditioned with certain ideas that would predispose you never to encounter the idea of pre-birth planning, or if you did encounter it, you'd then be inclined to say, this is ridiculous, and you'd very quickly move on to something else. If you incarnate into the current era and you come across this idea of pre-birth planning, that in and of itself is part of your pre-birth plan. It's not cheating because you wanted to have a spiritual awakening in this lifetime. That's really what this lifetime is all about. There's a worldwide spiritual awakening going on. And this is one of the reasons that I have in a pre-birth agreements with all of you, and Liesel does too, to bring you this kind of perspective so that you can awaken in this lifetime and help the earth and everybody on the earth to ascend to a higher vibrational dimension. The next question, someone says, if it's my plan, capital M, capital Y, if it's my plan, why can't I remember it? There are good reasons for that too. One of the main reasons for this self-induced amnesia is that when you don't remember what the other side is like, when you don't remember that you're an eternal, infinite being, a non-physical being, when you don't remember that you're actually made of light, and when it seems to you that the physical is all that exists, that has the effect of making everything that happens here seem deadly serious. And because it all seems so real and so serious, you will experience quite intense emotions in response to what happens in your life. A lot of the learning and the growth on the earth plane comes through the experience of intense emotion, and in particular, learning how to relate skillfully, wisely, lovingly with your own intense emotions. If you didn't have the amnesia, that would diffuse the intensity of the emotions you experience here. You would, in that case, be acutely aware of the fact that life on earth is nothing more than a play on a stage. That's really and truly what it is. And we're all the script writers, the directors, and the actors. But because we forget that, we experience intense emotion and we learn from that. If you remembered everything about your plan, most likely it would diffuse the emotions and therefore diffuse at least some of the learning. It's also the difference between an open book test and a closed book test in school. You remember if you had an open book test, there was a tendency not to prepare or study as hard because you figure you'll just look up the answers during the exam and then you don't learn as much. So by having the amnesia and forgetting your plan for at least part of the lifetime, it effectively turns that part of the life into a closed book test. You end up learning more. Anything you want to add?
No,
Okay.
well said.
Somebody else has asked, can souls change plans while in body? Not only can they do, you do it all the time. It happens quite a bit at night when you're asleep. You leave the physical body and in your astral or spirit body, you travel back to the other side. And when you're there, you meet with some of the other significant people in your life. And you ask one question, which is, are we learning what we came to learn? If the answer is yes, then carry on. But if the answer is no, then you have a conversation about the changes you need to make to your plan so that you can learn what you came to learn. This happens all the time. The other thing I'll say about that, if you pray, you can request to have changes made in your pre-birth plan. But at the same time, don't underestimate your power as a divine creator. Again, you're creating your life experience through your vibration. So yes, you can pray, turn it over to a quote unquote higher power, and plans can be amended that way. And I'm not discouraging anybody from doing that. But don't forget your power to raise your vibration and make changes to the plans and to your experiences through the change in vibration.
And I would add to that, that if you were going to, request that anything be changed in your plan, I would make the request with the caveat of this or something better and to the highest good, because when we're down here, we really do not see the aerial picture, the aerial perspective. And so you don't want to make a request as the personality that, that may be really in contrast with what your being really wants, and you may not even recognize that what you're experiencing something that seems awful at the time, and you just want this to be something other than it is. Well, there could come a time when you actually are grateful for that experience. I know that can sound crazy, but that I know that firsthand, because how I chose to awaken in this lifetime is through the experience of really severe obsessive compulsive disorder. And I've come to have a lot of gratitude for that experience, as excruciating as it has been at times, because I don't think I would have, I don't think I would be here in front of you if it weren't for that experience. So some of the things that in one time in our life we are most resistant to, it's actually possible to come to a place where you actually eventually are grateful for those experiences.
Somebody else wrote, how do I identify my lessons? Well, you could do the Between Lives soul regression, either as a private session or in one of the online workshops. But I wanted to share a story with you that gets to this. A number of years ago, I was working with a woman who at the time was in her 40s, and she shared with me the following true story that had begun when she was in her 20s. When she was in her 20s, this woman and her daughter, who was 7 at the time, they were at a swimming pool during the summer. And this woman was lying in a lounge chair in the sun next to the pool, and the little girl was playing in the water. Well, all of a sudden, the little girl jumped up out of the water, ran over to her mother and said, "You're not waking up the way we planned before we were born, so you're going to have a really bad accident." Well, the mother was horrified, partly because her daughter was saying such a strange thing, and partly at the idea of having to have an accident. But sure enough, not long thereafter, she had a car accident, which did not trigger a spiritual awakening. About a year later, she had a second and worse car accident, which also did not trigger a spiritual awakening. About a year later, she had a third and even worse car accident, which did trigger a spiritual awakening. So the thing to note here is that there were 3 car accidents, and the second was worse than the first. The third was worse than the second. If you see this kind of pattern in your life where the same kind of challenge keeps coming back around, and especially if it comes back in increasingly intense form each time, that is your soul really trying to get your attention about something. Pay very close attention to that. That's one of the main ways you can identify your lessons. Then there were several people who asked questions about the death of a child. And I'm not going to go into the specifics of those questions now, except to say There is a death of a loved one chapter in Your Soul's Plan, the first book. I would take a close look at that. But in particular, the reason I'm bringing this up, the people who have experienced the loss of a child, I want to suggest to you, contact an organization called Helping Parents Heal. This, in my opinion, is by far the best organization out there to help parents grieve the loss of a child. They have chapters all over the world. If they don't have a chapter where you're located, you could start one. That would be a beautiful form of service to the world. And many of the meetings are online, so it doesn't really matter where you're located, you can participate. They do an absolutely magnificent job of bringing the spiritual, not the religious, but the spiritual into the grieving process. I just can't speak highly enough about Helping Parents Heal. There are also a number of questions in the chat about the BLSR, and I'm going to try to quickly address these. Let's see, where does it start? Someone asked, would it be safe to know about a past life? So what happens in the regressions, you're shown only what you are ready to see and what is for your highest good to see. Occasionally, it can be something that's not pleasant to look at. That is possible. That isn't usually what happens, but it's possible. But even in those cases, you're shown only what is for your highest good to see and what you are ready to see. So the answer to the question is yes, it would be beneficial to see whatever they're showing you. And Stephanie, maybe you can help with this question. Someone is asking, it says early bird tickets are already sold out. How does one become eligible for an early bird?
I think the early bird, the time period has already elapsed for the early bird. But with that code that Rob gave, the Awaken Feb, you'll get, is it 15%?
15%.
Stephanie, which I think is vaguely comparable to the early bird.
And we do not record the BLSR workshop or the Star Souls, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. How do we get the messages in a BLSR? So on the other side, communication happens telepathically. So I will prompt the group, I'll say, ask your counsel such and such. And then you will ask silently, telepathically in your mind, and receive the answer telepathically if you're getting the answer in words. Now, there are a number of modes of receiving information from spirit, and this is why I really recommend, if you register for either of the workshops, listen to the recorded orientation in advance, because we go through the different modes of receiving information from spirit in that orientation. Briefly, you can also get information or answers to your questions as visual images. Could be colors, geometric symbols. You might hear words. You may see the counsel but not hear them. You might hear them but not see them. The answer can come in the form of an emotion or a feeling. You ask your counsel a question, a feeling washes over you, and the feeling itself is a message from the counsel that is intended to answer the question. Keep in mind that feelings are the language of the soul. So they might communicate through feeling. And then very common, downloads of information. You ask a question of your counsel, then you just immediately know the answer in full. You don't necessarily hear or see or feel anything. You don't even know how you know the answer. You just know the answer. Downloads of information.
And also too, the way the workshop is structured, after we do the Between Lives soul regression, we then break for lunch. And so you have the opportunity to journal and, take notes on what your experience was. And you're also provided with a list of the questions that you're prompted to ask when you're in front of the counsel to help jog your memory after the experience.
And then 2 people asked, will they definitely have the experience, definitely go into trance? The answer is no. Hypnosis is a sensitive and delicate process. And there are always some people in every workshop who don't have the experience. If you take the workshop and you don't have the experience, write to me and I'll have some suggestions for you. But it's not something that can be guaranteed. The odds are very much in your favor, but it's not something that we can guarantee.
One thing though that we do is once you've taken the Between Lives Soul Regression workshop for the first time, then you're subsequently qualified to take an additional workshop in the future, an additional Between Lives workshop in the future at a highly discounted rate. And that was actually the suggestion of the Beings of Light, because they wanted people to be able to take these over and over again and basically work on expanding their consciousness. So so I believe once you've taken it for the first time already, I believe that then if you take it a subsequent time, I think it's only like $79. So it becomes a much more easily affordable thing. So there, I say that just for the sense of maybe taking some of the pressure off of, the first time. If you don't, if you don't end up going into trance, know that, there are subsequent opportunities, and it's, it's kind of like something that you can work out at and get better at over time.
All right, we'll take some live questions now. So for those of you who are watching on the recording, thank you for joining us. We're going to stop the recording now.